So today in this video, we are going to learn a very important topic, that is writing a story. How to write a story. It seems a very complicated one, but then again, it's not that tough. Once you follow and plan the things, writing story, I am very sure would not be very tough for you. Now, how to plan a story? In this video, we will cover a few points where we'll come to know that how you are going to plan your story. So, for planning a story, we must go through certain important constituents of the story, or you may call characteristics of the story, or it may also be called the elements of the story. So, let's go through it one by one. Basically, we start a story simply by describing setting and then moving on to the character that makes the story quite boring. And the writer as well as the reader loses his enthusiasm when he reads the story, or your teacher loses her enthusiasm or his enthusiasm while she reads or he reads your story. So today I'll teach you few basic constituents of the story which you'll really find interesting, and I'm sure that this would really help you in planning your story in a better way. Number one is problem. Always remember, instead of starting a story with setting, you must start your story with a problem. Isn't it interesting? Like, it may be adventure story, or you may say, for an example, a boy kidnapped. So you need to write the problem in two words, two or three words. Jot down the points, and then again, once you jot down points for all the elements over here, you are ready to frame your story. So number one, we'll go with the problem. Yes, and then again, you're going to mention the problem. Suppose a boy was kidnapped. Now, once you mention the problem, move on to the setting. Now, your question will be where? At this point, you are going to mention the place. You are going to describe the ambience, right? And then again, once you start describing the ambience or the setting, always remember that it must not be too elaborate. It must not be written in very elaborated form. Just limit yourself to 30 to 50 words, because the one who is reading your story or the teacher who is reading your story would like to know what are the rising actions or the events in the story. Isn't it? What happened to the boy next, right? So after describing the ambience or writing all about the ambience or setting, for example, the boy was kidnapped from the mall, let's move on to the plot of the story. Plot means you are going to jot down important action and plot of the story. For example, like how did and why did the boy was kidnapped? Isn't it? How was the boy kidnapped and why was the boy kidnapped? And we are going to mention the events like number one, number two, number three, likewise. And what happened to the boy next? And once you come to the plot, you would really want to know the characters. Fine, the character may be the hero of the story or you yourself, isn't it? He may be the villain of the story, the protagonist of the story, or the supporter in the story. You need to be a bit creative in this way while you write the story, isn't it? Once you jot down the characters, you need to find out the solution. Fine, solution like how he managed to escape from the kidnappers. How the boy managed to escape from the kidnappers, isn't it? So once you find out the solution from the story, your story is complete and you are ready to write the story now. Remember, always plan your story. Planning is very important when you write a story. It's not only meant for those children who are the learners or the beginners, but also for everyone if you want to write a good story. Again, in the plot and action, where you jot down the important points, there you need to keep in mind the rising action which raises the curiosity of the reader, which raises the curiosity of the teacher once she is reading your story. Like whether the boy was killed, isn't it? And if not, if he managed to hide himself behind the sack, and if he sneezed, what would happen the next? How did he manage to stop himself? So these are the rising actions which must be included in the plot of the story. So let's revise it once again. If you start the story, always you start the story with the problem. Then move on to the setting. After describing the setting, you just start with the plot. Write down the important points or actions that took place as I told you. Then move on to the characters, because for describing the plot or elaborating this point, you need to mention the characters. Mention the characters, need to be very creative as I told you. Then the solution at last. Now, coming to the point. Number one, as I told you, begin your story with the problem. For example, a boy kidnapped or superstitions. Setting. Mention the setting, like from where the boy was kidnapped, where is it practiced, where these superstitions are practiced, like in rural area, urban area, likewise. Describe the setting or ambience in about 30 words, because there may be word limit given to you. For writing a story, it may be 150 to 200 words. So you have to limit yourself. Your teacher or a reader is not interested in knowing the setting. So no need to describe in an elaborate way. 30 words are more than enough. Now moving on to the plot. What are the actions or events? Major actions in the story or events. So you need to jot down the points. Like why and how the boy was kidnapped. Reasons for people being superstitious. And why. Note down the events point-wise. Then there will be a rising action where you need to see that the curiosity of the reader is heightened, okay, and it enhances. So you need to use this part, like as I told you, the example, whether the boy was killed. If not, how did he manage to hide himself? And if he hid himself, did he manage to control his sneeze? Isn't it humorous? Then characters. Moving on to the characters. Introduce the characters. Once you start writing the plot, you need to introduce the characters. Characters may be you yourself, the hero, the protagonist, villain, and the other supporting characters in the story. Now, you need to use adjectives, adverbs in order to describe. Use good vocabulary, use good adjectives to describe the character, which is very important again. Moving on to the solution, which is again very important part of the story to conclude your story. For example, you can see over here, how did the boy escape? How the people were discouraged to follow this evil. So once you complete these format, you will be able to write a good story. I've tried my level best to explain you in as short as a possible way I can. Now again, the important point here is the use of good vocabulary, which is very important in writing any good story. You can use adjectives and adverbs. Okay, so try to use good adjectives and adverbs while you frame your sentence. Then use past tense when you write the story. I hope these points are clear to you, and definitely once when you start writing a story, jot down the points as I told you. Write small sentences, write 2 words, jot down the points and frame a story. Thank you everyone.